What if I told you that the reason you sometimes feel out of place in the crowd is not because something is wrong with you, but because something is waking up within you? When you begin to see through the noise, the gossip, the endless chase for approval, the constant performance, you can no longer connect in the same way. And that is not weakness, but the first sign of strength. In this video, we'll explore why the path of authenticity often feels like walking alone, and how solitude, far from being loneliness, becomes the foundation of freedom and clarity. Drawing on Alan Watts' philosophy, along with timeless wisdom from Buddhism and Taoism, we'll journey into the heart of what it means to step back from illusion and step into truth. Stay with me until the end, because what begins as silence may reveal itself as the deepest form of connection you've ever known. And when we finish, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into life's hidden wisdom. Part 1. Awakening and the first step away from the crowd. When a man begins to awaken, the world he once knew starts to shift beneath his feet. The conversations that used to fill his days suddenly feel hollow, revolving around gossip, comparisons, and complaints. He no longer finds nourishment in them, not because he despises others, but because something within him has outgrown the need to belong in that way. Alan Watts once observed that when you finally understand the rules of the game, you don't storm the table in protest, you simply stop playing. And that's exactly what happens. The chosen man doesn't withdraw out of arrogance or disdain, but out of clarity. He sees that so much of life has been shaped by invisible expectations, to speak when silence is more honest, to nod in agreement when disagreement stirs within. Now, instead of forcing himself to keep up, he gently steps aside. Like a Taoist sage who follows the river's flow, he allows life to carry him without resistance. The crowd continues its dance, chasing validation and approval, but he no longer feels compelled to join. In his quiet detachment, there is no rebellion, only recognition that to wake up is to see through the illusions of connection and to honor the deeper current beneath them. Part 2. The quiet withdrawal and the masks of society. As the man steps back, he begins to notice what was always there but never seen: the endless theater of masks. Every interaction is tinged with performance. The polite smile hiding discomfort, the rehearsed laughter to smooth over silence, the careful choice of words to ensure approval. It is not malice, it is a habit. People wear these masks so long they mistake them for their true faces. But once his eyes clear, he can no longer unsee the stage. Taoist wisdom compares this to muddy water. When it is left undisturbed, it becomes clear, revealing the stones beneath. In the same way, his quiet withdrawal uncovers the depth behind appearances. He recognizes that society thrives on scripts: who to befriend, what to admire, what to condemn. Alan Watts reminded us that much of what we call normal is just consensus, not truth. So he stops reciting the lines. He no longer flatters for belonging, no longer bends himself to be accepted. This shift confuses those around him. They sense something different, though they can't name it. He hasn't changed outwardly, yet the subtle current of his presence reveals he is no longer acting. In the silence of authenticity, the theater grows dim, and he stands apart, not as an enemy of the play, but as someone who has simply stepped off the stage. Part 3. Solitude as a natural result, not isolation. The distance that grows is not born of anger, but of inevitability. He doesn't slam doors or sever ties. Rather, he stops pretending, and the space creates itself. Like the Buddha leaving his palace, he walks away not because he despises what is inside, but because he has glimpsed something beyond it. This is the dawn of solitude, not loneliness, but a new horizon opening between who he once was and who he is becoming. In this quiet space, he learns the difference between being alone and being empty. Aloneness becomes a mirror, showing him what remains when the noise fades. The Tao reminds us that the valley is fertile because it is hollow, and so too is solitude fertile when embraced without fear. What others might call isolation, he begins to feel as freedom. Freedom from the constant negotiation for approval. Freedom from the small talk that shields people from silence. Freedom from roles that demand endless performance. In this unfolding, solitude is not a punishment but a teacher, whispering truths that cannot be heard in crowds. He realizes that stepping back is not losing the world, it is gaining himself. Stop. Part 4. Seeing through illusions of connection. In solitude, his vision sharpens, and he begins to see what once went unnoticed. The threads binding most people together are not woven from truth or depth, but from habit, comfort, and shared illusions. Conversations circle endlessly around dissatisfaction with work, the pursuit of status, or the defense of beliefs, never truly examined. He recalls how he once mistook this for connection, mistook the chatter for intimacy. Now it all feels more like static, noise meant to keep silence at bay. Existentialist thought reminds us that man often fears silence because it echoes the void within. Yet facing that void is the beginning of authenticity. He notices how often people talk just to avoid stillness, how every moment is padded with distraction to escape the mirror of their own minds. Alan Watts would say that our culture conditions us to fill the emptiness, but in doing so, we miss the fullness that silence offers. The chosen man no longer craves validation, agreement, or reassurance to confirm his place in the world. When he listens, he does so out of care, not obligation. When he speaks, it is because words are needed, not to fill the air. And in this new way of being, his connections grow fewer, but infinitely more real. Part 5. The subtle shift others sense. From the outside, nothing seems dramatically different. He still greets people, still shows up when needed, still wears the same face. Yet something essential has shifted beneath the surface, and those around him can feel it, even if they cannot explain why. They sense that he no longer bends toward approval, no longer molds himself into a version that others find easy to accept. This subtle independence unsettles some, for when a man stops playing the game, the other players feel exposed. Taoist wisdom calls this wu-wei effortless action, a way of being that flows without striving. He is no longer trying to impress, no longer competing for attention, no longer rehearsing lines for the comfort of others. To some, this quiet honesty feels admirable. To others, it feels threatening, as if his silence reflects something they'd rather not see. People begin labeling him distant, too quiet, or changed. What they truly mean is that he no longer fits into the roles they relied on him to play. Alan Watts once said that most people fear those who live authentically, because their very presence reveals how much of life is a performance. And so the man walks gently, carrying within him a stillness that mirrors the unspoken truths others avoid. Part 6. From performance to presence. The more he releases the need for approval, the more he sees how much of life is built on fragile agreements. Most connections are not rooted in honesty, but in silent contracts. I will validate your illusions if you validate mine. It is a performance where everyone agrees to keep the story going, even when the story no longer feels true. Alan Watts once remarked that we rarely meet people as they are, we meet the masks they wear. And now, without effort, he refuses to wear one. He no longer offers comfort just to ease tension, nor pretends to agree simply to keep the peace. Like a Zen monk who bows only when the heart bows, his actions arise from sincerity, not expectation. This clarity unsettles others because it strips away the familiar signals, the nods, the forced laughter, the subtle reassurance. They wonder why he has grown so quiet, not realizing that silence is often truer than words. In letting go of performance, he discovers presence. He is not defiant, only honest. He does not argue or convince, but his authenticity is enough to disrupt the script others cling to. In that disruption lies a freedom deeper than belonging, the freedom to be himself without disguise. Part 7. The gift of solitude, from loneliness to peace. What many label as loneliness, he begins to recognize as peace. Where once he feared the absence of noise, he now welcomes it. The stillness that others avoid becomes a sanctuary, not a prison. In Zen practice, silence is not emptiness, but fullness, a silence alive with presence. Sitting alone, he discovers that solitude is not the absence of company, but the presence of himself. He no longer fills the hours with distractions, no longer seeks out company just to avoid his own thoughts. Instead, he learns to rest in the quiet, to let the mind settle like a pond untouched by wind. Alan Watts often spoke of how we run from ourselves, filling every moment with activity to avoid the simple act of being. Now, he has stopped running, and in this pause, he discovers something precious, stillness that feels like home. Others may interpret his independence as withdrawal, but he knows the truth. He has simply found contentment in his own presence. The solitude once feared as isolation has revealed itself as the ground of peace, a state of being where nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be removed. Stop. Part 8. The disruption of clarity. As his clarity deepens, he notices how unsettling it can be to those still bound by the need for validation. Without offering constant reassurance, without mirroring emotions simply to maintain harmony, his neutrality becomes a quiet disruption. People interpret his silence as judgment, his calm as arrogance, his detachment as disinterest. Yet none of these are true. He is simply no longer willing to sacrifice truth for the comfort of illusion. Alan Watts once observed that much of what we call love or friendship is often just a mutual agreement to keep each other's fantasies alive. When he stops feeding these illusions, relationships begin to dissolve on their own, not in conflict, but in quiet fading. What remains are rare, luminous connections, rooted not in need, but in recognition. Like two candles that burn brightly on their own, yet choose to share light, true friendship does not demand completion, only presence. Taoism reminds us that what is real cannot be forced. It arises naturally, like blossoms in spring. In the same way, the bonds he now honors are not based on complaint, routine, or performance, but on mutual seeing, two souls who walk together not to escape solitude, but to deepen it. Part 9. The paradox of needing less. As the layers of pretense fall away, he discovers a paradox. The less he seeks from others, the more whole he feels. He no longer needs recognition to confirm what he already knows within. The endless craving for attention, approval, or belonging dissolves, and with it many of the ties that once held him. Life grows quieter, yet richer. In needing less, he begins to taste freedom. The Buddhists speak of attachment as the root of suffering, and here he finds that truth lived out not in theory, but in experience. His relationships are no longer measured by frequency of contact or the exchange of validation, but by the depth of presence shared in silence or honest word. Alan Watts often pointed out that when you stop chasing, things have a way of arriving naturally. So it is with him. He does not chase connection, yet genuine connection comes of its own accord. He ceases to measure himself by how much space he takes up in other people's lives, and instead learns to dwell in the vast space of his own being. What appears to others as withdrawal is in fact a return to something steady, unshakable, and profoundly alive within. Part 10. Walking alone as a path of truth. In time, walking alone no longer feels unusual. It becomes the most natural way of being. He does not interpret distance as a problem, but as the inevitable result of living honestly. While the world hurries to fill the air with noise and chase the comfort of crowds, he has learned to move quietly, asking nothing, demanding nothing. Alan Watts said that authenticity is more precious than acceptance, and here he finds the truth proven. He no longer trades sincerity for belonging, nor truth for harmony. Like the Tao that flows without striving, he allows life to carry him as he is, untouched by the need to conform. To others, it may look like exile, but in his heart it is freedom, the freedom of a man no longer bound by the need to perform. He remembers that rare hope. Perhaps someday another awakened soul will cross his path, someone who has seen through the same illusions and rests comfortably in silence. Until then, he walks alone, not as an outsider, but as one at peace with the cost of truth. In that solitude lies not emptiness, but the fullness of being. As we reach the end of this journey, let us pause and reflect on the lesson behind these 10 parts. The chosen man who walks alone is not running from the world, he is walking toward truth. He has learned that masks eventually fall, that illusions fade, and that real freedom begins when we no longer trade authenticity for acceptance. From Alan Watts's reminder that the game ends when you stop playing, to the Taoist way of flowing without striving, and the Buddhist path of releasing attachment, one truth shines clearly. Solitude is not emptiness, but the space where wisdom is born. It teaches us to value presence over performance, clarity over comfort, and peace over noise. Now the question is not only about him, but about us. How often do we still cling to roles, distractions, or approval? And are we brave enough to sit in silence, to walk alone, if truth demands it? I'd love to hear your reflections. Share in the comments what resonated with you most, and how you've experienced solitude in your own life. And if you found value in this message, remember to subscribe to the channel, so together we can keep unfolding the deeper wisdom of life. Because, in the end, this path is not about being alone, it's about becoming whole.